The one thing we can't be doing on climate is rolling back policies and also creating less certainty, because one thing businesses need more than anything else is certainty of direction. And I can be certain to everyone listening here, climate change costs are only going to get worse.
Welcome to Wonk. An awful lot can change in 10 years. In 2015, Mark Carney, then governor of the Bank of England, gave a speech called The Tragedy of the Horizon. It introduced the idea that the world's financial institutions should begin to price in climate risk. That same year, a new government came to power in Canada, which swept in some of the boldest climate actions in the world, including a price on carbon. Much of both of those efforts had been rolled back in the past few years. Catherine McKenna was Canada's Environment Minister in 2015, and in that role, she emerged as a leading voice in the climate debate. She also faced some of the unprecedented and disturbing abuse that was aimed at public officials, and she became an advocate for the voice of women in politics. McKenna is still a force at the center of Canada's climate discussion and the global one. She also has a new memoir called Run Like a Girl. Catherine McKenna joins us now. Thanks for being with us.
It's great to join you, Amanda.
I wanted to start because some of that anniversary of that speech is getting some attention. And for people that are immersed in the climate urgency, I wonder how it feels to see the rollback across the world, Catherine. And I want to come to what's happened in Canada, but just broadly, the state of play. What's it like right now?
Well, it's interesting. So I was just in New York for the UN General Assembly and Climate Week. So I'm the chair of an expert group on net zero action by businesses, financial institutions, cities, and regions. And, there we are with Trump doing his climate denial speech, the big green con or something.
Yep.
It's a complicated space, so it's easy to say nothing is happening. But I'm doing this report, so I'm doing my third report about the state of play when it comes to climate. And a lot of it is I can make many arguments for why we need to act on climate, but I just focus on the economic one. And it's interesting you brought up Mark Carney's speech, because it's 10 years since the tragedy of the horizon. And I think it's really relevant because the reality is the climate costs and risks are more expensive than ever. So I was speaking to Bloomberg and a business audience. Unfortunately, I was like the one climate economic voice there that was willing to say this. So I said, you want a growth sector? It's called climate, both in terms of the costs and risks. I was at UCLA in January of this year while the wildfires were burning. This is the most expensive natural disaster in the U.S. history, and that's insured costs. But of course, now many people can't get insurances. Businesses can't get insurance. So Mark Carney spoke about the infrastructure risk. So that's very clear. It's much more expensive, the cost, and it's accelerated far more than we expected in the last 10 years. He spoke about the litigation risk, and I think this is really underestimated here in Canada. I used to work on Bay Street, and the reality is because you can do attribution science much better, that the top emitters in the world are now being sued, and you can actually link their pollution that they're putting in the atmosphere to the increased risk of particular events. So I think people better start thinking about that. And that's not just oil and gas who seem to not care about being sued, but it's for folks that work for oil and gas, whether it is, law firms or accounting firms or advertising firms. And then the last thing is the economic risk. And this is what Carney called the Minsky moment. And this is a real thing. Like our economy, we can pretend that climate isn't a thing and just pretend that we can continue moving forward, in building new fossil fuel infrastructure. And obviously, it's a complicated transition. It's not going to happen overnight. But the reality is the costs are going to overwhelm us. And there will be a moment where people will be more rational, including the business side. So look, I think there is still a lot of action, including in Republican states where they're still moving forward on renewables because they're just cheaper and better. But it's more complicated, more because of the political headwinds than anything else. And Donald Trump has caused a lot of problems because one of my clients is Orsted. So the first day it's not just subsidies of fossil fuels now, it's actually blocking the market for renewables, which as I pointed out are actually cheaper and better and certainly much less polluting.
All of this, of course, is also true in Canada. You talk about this in the book because it happened, unfortunately, it happened not just in the last couple of years, but just shortly after you left that government. And that was a rollback of some of the central policies. The price on carbon does go to the heart of how we use and how we think about our own footprint. How did that feel? How does it feel that the kind of the, I would say, sort of the crowning jewel of the green push in Canada what has been dismantled
Well, so first of all, we should distinguish. So we still have a price on pollution for heavy emitters, so the big
so far?
polluters. And it needs to, honestly, that one really needs to be tightened up. I mean, you can't, it's a basic small c principle that you can't be free to pollute. But in my book, so I might as well, like, here you go. My book, and it's got a lot of images, so it's not hopefully as boring as a normal political memoir. I have a chapter called Hard Things Are Hard. And I think it just outlines like, look, there's a lot of blame to go around, I think, when it comes to the consumer carbon price. Some of it was with our government in the communications wasn't great. We didn't pay to actually explain our policy to people because we thought we were above that. That was very weird. I would never do that again for a major policy where people actually have to file their taxes to get money back.
Right.
But there was also a lot of problems when it came, to disinformation by, and I hate to say it, I sound like a partisan, but it's just the truth. It was conservative politicians who spent every day taxpayer dollars misleading Canadians because this was a conservative policy. I had worked with Brian Mulroney on this policy. I'd worked with George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan. No, not liberals, folks, not progressives, but folks that just believed in markets. I even got a video from Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had brought in pricing in a bipartisan way in California, where it's pretty good. I got to say, this is, how to terminate pollution. So, I tried everything, but it is really hard when there's disinformation campaigns. And then, of course, that also turned into a lot of the hate and attacks I got were like,
Right.
of course, climate Barbie, but worse in a way, even though that was annoying. Worse were like, this job killing carbon price. So then people thought like, there I am. I just wake up every morning trying to kill people's jobs, which is obviously the opposite. And this policy gave more money back to, by the way, low income and middle income Canadians. So they're worse off because we've lost it. And I will be also frank, when it was politicized by Justin Trudeau, when I was not in government and I literally couldn't believe it. There was a podium sign that said affordability. I was like, wait a minute, that's the message of carbon pricing. We're giving the money back. It's making life more affordable. And there was a pause on heating oil in Atlantic Canada. I think that was really, that really was fatal. Now, it was Mark Carney, who I do know well. We've worked on climate in Canada and globally. I mean, he had to make a call. We had discussions, including with his team, about this, about, ending the carbon pricing. And it was a bitter pill. It was a super bitter pill. But you also have to win elections. And had the Liberals not won, then we would have lost all our policies. But look, the one thing we can't be doing on climate is rolling back policies and also creating less certainty, because one thing businesses need more than anything else is certainty of direction. And I can be certain to everyone listening here, climate change costs are only going to get worse. So the risk to you in your business and the risk to our economy generally are massive. So we just have to get on with it. And I wish it wasn't so polarizing. I don't have a solution to that. But I do think if we don't get serious, we are passing on massive costs to future generations. And those costs are also impacting us right now.
Of course, one of the ways to get serious about something that is a distant problem approaching fast is to bring it forward. It was sort of what Mark Carney was getting at. And your government, when you were in government, was part of that, where we were in the industrial price on carbon, you can argue falls in line with this, which is, look, the Europeans are going to put a border tax on things related to carbon. So it's actually good for your business. It's right in line with next quarter's results to toe the line here. It's why it's so undermining when people start falling out. And as you say, the US president is not helping. I did want to ask you about Mark Carney, because I know you and I have both read his book, Values, and you've spent a long time, you understand kind of where he's coming from. How hard must it be to govern right now, in this moment, in this country, with those values, and yet having to make some of the trade-offs? I guess I would say this is not a pro-climate agenda that we're hearing in Canada. It's pro-growth, it's pro-security, it's pro-national economy. Is it pro-climate?
Well, I hope it's not pro emissions because that's an economic issue, as he clearly laid out. And it's actually worse right now, as we know. You have to be able to talk and chew gum at the same time, but it's really hard. Look, I'm not going to underestimate. I lived through Trump 1 in cabinet. It was a totally different thing because largely they were ineffectual and incompetent, to be honest. But
Right.
this time round, I mean, we've heard the rhetoric. So, of course, we need to stand up for our economy. But just yesterday, I think it was Imperial just fired a bunch of oil and gas workers. The reality is, the oil and gas sector isn't here. We talk about it. It's almost like a mythology that we have in Canada. Look, they want to reduce their costs. They want to pay as little as possible for pollution, and just rewarding them. And put aside, like, whether or not a pipeline should be built, should taxpayers be subsidizing one of the sectors that has made the most profits, like massive historic record profits, because largely not because they're geniuses, to be honest, but because of an illegal, Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. And then those profits are repatriated to shareholders, largely in the United States, and massive CEO bonuses. I'm from Hamilton. I don't know. In Hamilton, that's not super cool because we actually believe that we all need to do our fair share. And the oil and gas sector is not doing its fair share while causing the climate crisis, while telling us, the Canadians, that we have to pay for the pollution they cause. Like, if they want to step up and pay to reduce their emissions, which they should be required to do, like every other sector has done, and they're now 30% of our emissions. The only thing they're adding, to be honest, right now is emissions to Canada. I think that that's a huge problem, and I think everyone just has to take a very, very clear-eyed, rational approach. There are limited taxpayer dollars. This sector has not done its part. It has made promises, and I tried to work with them. You can read it in the book. Like, I spent a lot of time with oil and gas CEOs,
Hmm.
and they said that they were committed. They talked about doing CCS a decade ago. They talked about, how they were committed to the industrial price. They're now fighting the actual industrial price. So it should be even freer to pollute for them. And actually, we should pay to clean up. So we should, privatize their profits, socialize the costs, and it should be, regular people who should be paying not just to clean up their pollution, but we're paying the costs every day of climate change. It's not very rational. And I think at this challenging time, and as I say, I mean, Mark Carney knows about the risks and costs of climate change better than anyone. So I'm hopeful, that he, of course, is focused on trade. He's focused on growing the economy. I was infrastructure minister. We got to get projects built quickly. But, we also have to be realistic that we have to do our part in tackling climate change because it's a global challenge. And also, we want to avoid squandering taxpayer dollars when companies and creating the wrong incentives. So they just continue giving their profits back to their shareholders outside of Canada, and stranded assets. Like, I think that
Right.
there's a lack of understanding. Like, the world is moving forward, and China has been disruptive in this space. They are winning, by the way. Obviously, they're winning on EVs, they're winning on solar, they're winning on battery storage, but they are also transforming the energy needs. So that's why we talk about peak energy by 2030, because if you go outside of Canada, the EVs, Chinese EVs are everywhere, and that's really driving down the energy needs. But we seem to be less aware of projections from the International Energy Agency. They're not, the most progressive organization. So, look, I think we have to be really tough in Canada. We have to protect our economy. We have to stand up for trade. We have to get major projects built. But we need to be part of the energy transition, both because it's an economic risk and an economic opportunity, and we also, I think, care about future generations and not just passing on the costs of climate change, which are growing every minute, to them.
One of the, so you speak about taxpayer dollars and these big projects that are being announced. One of the investments that the Canadian government will make is in carbon capture and storage. And whatever you think about that, in terms of kind of, its feasibility at scale and et cetera, so far, as I understand it, you can correct me, I'm sure, the benefits of it have been used to pump more oil. In other words, it's sort of a circular use at the moment, and it's actually 97%, I think, is the number I saw. It actually creates more oil production. Now, on the one hand, you can say, great, we're an energy superpower, more oil is good, and then it's lower emission oil, and we like that. There is an argument that actually And this actually goes to the heart of the debate, Catherine. I think the reason why this becomes so visceral is there is a extreme view on climate, of course, that says until we find the right solution to fossil fuels, we cannot solve this problem. We can't clean up our way, scrub our way out of it. And actually, so we have to stop using oil. And that actually does elicit hatred. And of course, partly that's because it's an economic issue for Canada. How do we square those things? Because right now the government is actually facilitating more, maybe not more emissions, but definitely more oil for sure.
Well, I mean, I haven't heard any announcement about CCS. There's been talk about a grand bargain. And by the way, I thought we were doing a grand bargain. And what did we get? We just got more emissions. And the oil and gas sector didn't live up to any of their promises. They engaged in massive greenwashing campaigns. I should know since I wrote the report on greenwashing globally and what constitutes it. And as I say, like they're demanding taxpayer dollars. So carbon capture and storage, let's just talk about this. Like this has been talked about for decades. As you say, generally it's used to pump more oil. And, you know, the studies have shown one, it's not cost effective. Two, it's not even that effective in reducing emissions. It would be a very minor percentage of emission, even if it works. And three, why are taxpayers paying for this back to like the I think we have to like remember history. So in 2015, the Alberta government stood with the oil and gas sector. Murray Edwards was actually literally standing beside Rachel Notley, standing by environmentalists, standing by economists saying, okay, this is the deal. We're going to move forward on climate and oil and gas is going to do its part. It was going to have a price on pollution. We were going to have tough methane standards. There was going to be a cap on emissions from oil sands. And basically, we have none of that. Our government said, okay, great, Alberta's doing its part. We should move ahead with support the pipeline, which they demanded as part of our climate plan. And what do we have now? A pipeline that is like 500% over budget. So once again, taxpayers are paying. And you can say, okay, the product's getting to market. Sure, I was part of the government, so we did that. I just think we need to be clear-headed. That was a ton of taxpayer dollars where we de-risked the project. And meanwhile, that side of the bargain was not held up by oil and gas. And as I said, they've had tons of opportunity to invest in CCS. They said they were going to do it by 2030. They had tons of money. While Canadians are losing jobs, while we're having massive affordability challenges, oil and gas are making tons of money and saying they're going to do things. And what do? They just give it back to their shareholders and fat cat CEOs. As I said, like I just don't think it's fair. I did pinky promises, and it might seem, for your audience, they might say, "Oh gosh, this sounds lame." Well, actually, I'm going to tell you, it's not lame. I did pinky promises with young people, and young people said, "We're going to do our part on climate change." You can see the pictures in the book. And I said, I'm going to do my part. I'm still holding up my part of the bargain. These kids who are now, one of them, an example, is actually suing the Ford government for not living up to the target. She's doing her part of the bargain, as are all these kids across the country. And the one sector in Canada that is not holding up its side of the bargain is oil and gas. And you don't get things for free in life. I'm sorry. And so as the Carney government tries to figure this out, of course, we need to figure out and protect our economy. I'm like number one Canadian hardcore. I was infrastructure minister, get projects built, but also figure out what are our long-term goals. But these even aren't even long-term. These are short-term. Like more oil and gas means more climate change. And if Canada doesn't do its part globally as part of the commitment under the Paris Agreement, then we have no moral authority to go call out other countries. We just don't. Also, we stand the risk of stranded assets and unfunded liabilities, which there are tons in the oil sands. And so I don't know. I'm just like a regular person who came to politics to try to do things. I wasn't an environmentalist, but then I saw some hard facts and I saw massive opportunities. And this is the thing about Canada. We are the most fortunate country in the world. We're in a very challenging situation now that we have the US, which used to be our greatest friend and closest trading partner, coming after us. So we're going to have to dig deep. I just think that we're also going to have to, deal with the climate crisis, like just be normal. Those are two things, like our economy, but it's completely linked. If you think that climate isn't an economic issue, like folks aren't paying attention, because it is costing us a ton of money right now. The projections are far greater and the solutions are better and cheaper. So I just hope we get with the program and do the hard work and not make excuses. Like, hard things are hard. And look, Mark Carney is very smart. He is working extremely hard. I think he's done a great job in trying to, deal with a very erratic US. But climate isn't going anywhere. So we've got to focus on that as well.
This subject is contentious everywhere, but certainly in Canada, and it becomes regional and it becomes obviously political. You were a lightning rod. You drew negative attention, and I think some of that would have happened to any environment minister, regardless. But some of it was definitely misogynistic. It became misogynistic or it originated from misogyny. Hard to know for certain, but we know that it was because of the language that was used and the personal nature of the attacks. It's interesting. You tell the story in the book about taking your son Matt when he was 6 to question period before you had ever decided to run. And I loved that he looked around and said, "Why aren't there more women? And why are they all shouting?" And I thought that actually could have been the title of your book. Um, you advocate for women in public life, and I don't know how to put this kindly, Catherine, but you are the poster child of why women won't run. What do you say to young women or your peers to say public office is good, you should serve, when it's so horrific for the people that actually do it?
This book took me a long time to write, and it's a very different book because it's not just like climate change or pricing pollution, but I did put a lot about the hate and abuse I got, including maybe some stories people haven't heard, but also some hard stats, like that there actually was a violence against women in politics campaign against me, that the massive increase, people have studied my social media, the massive increase of hate and violent attacks online when we brought in carbon pricing. Because I think like we just have to keep it real. And I owe it to women and girls not to lie. I'm a straight talker. Like I'm not going to go tell you it's going to be all rosy. But what I did say when I left politics is I would always support women and girls who want to go into politics and who are in politics. So I owe it to them. I don't need sympathy. That's not why I wrote this. I'm out of politics. I need change. Like we need change for these women and girls. So if people don't understand, then we won't be able to get a lot of the other measures like online harm legislation. We always get caught off in this big thing like, oh, freedom of speech. By the way, Rebel Media, kind of a rage farming outlet, they went after me saying I couldn't block them on social media, alleging freedom of speech. And I was like, oh, that's such a weird bastardization of the idea of freedom of speech. I happen to be a lawyer. So guess what? My freedom of speech was being violated, were all these people around me, putting aside even the hate and the threats that developed as a result of that. And so if we want to be able to take measures like that and have public support, if we want public support for more security for politicians, if we want public support for saying it's not okay when politicians engage in personal attacks, I don't care. Go after on policy, that's fine, but not personal attacks or even doxing that we've seen Andrew Scheer do, then we actually need to understand the challenge. And in my book, I also put in a lovely letter from Luigi. So I was at the airport just hanging out, and this gentleman started walking over. And I have to say, it's terrible, but I still get kind of nervous. I don't exactly know what's going to happen when someone comes over to me. Often they have lovely things to say. Thank you for your service. Sometimes they don't. And so he hands me a note and walks off. And so, I gingerly open the note, and it was the loveliest note. So Luigi is not a liberal. He's a conservative from New Brunswick. Thank you, Luigi, for writing this note, which I put in my book with his permission, where he said, look, we probably don't agree on much. I'm a conservative, but I appreciate what you did in politics and the fact that you stood up for women in politics because I have 3 girls, 3 daughters, and I wanted them to know that I support you and that it's not okay. And the reason I put that towards the end of the book is that's really the call. Because at the end of the day, as we know, policies and all these changes only work if you actually have supportive people. And so I thought that was just really lovely that we can disagree, but we can be reasonable. I also talked about Jean Chrétien, who was the
I
mentor.
love this part. Yeah.
He said to me actually, and it was kind of funny because he wasn't thinking we were reasonable. He didn't always think that the Trudeau government was reasonable. So he said to me, Catherine, les Canadiens sont raisonnables. Soyez raisonnable. So Canadians are reasonable. Be reasonable. And I think that's the other thing. Like when I talk about say oil and gas or the energy transition or climate, I just try to talk like a reasonable person because I believe Canadians are reasonable. The problem, though, is the polarization online, the disinformation online, the attacks online, which are all amplified with algorithms that are used to foster hate, and these are all they're all owned by tech bros that are billionaires and Americans with a particular agenda. Like that's a real problem, and so we're going to have to fight this. But I think, Canadians are going to have to, we're going to have to really dig deep if we don't want polarization on every issue. And the reality is, climate is impacting, if we just take one thing, it's impacting everyone. Like Fort McMurray, 70,000 people had to be evacuated on one road. Can you imagine? Like a lot of people could have died if the fire went on the road. Like I think we're kind of living in this dream world, and I'm not trying to be polarizing. I'm really not. I worked so hard to bring people together. I talk about how I lay awake at night staring at my fan because I had made a mistake when I had a conversation with media, which made it sound that like I didn't care about people who disagreed with me, which wasn't my point. But I really thought hard about it. But I think, there are real things out there that we need to deal with: affordability, housing, getting projects built, the fact that we are Canada in a world that, is totally changing, and being a smaller country in terms of population is going to be extremely challenging, but also climate change. So I don't know. I hope people like my book because also I think it's intended to show that I'm just a regular person. Like I know people like you become a flashpoint, like either people super love you or super hate you, or some people have no idea who you are. So that's like fine. But I just like was a kid from Hamilton who actually never wanted to be a politician. I wanted to go to the Olympics in swimming and it didn't work out. But I also wanted to make change and I didn't really know how to do it. And I tried in different ways, starting a charitable organization, worked for a peacekeeping mission. Sometimes I just tried to be a mom and hang in, of course, like most of us. And then I decided to go in politics to make change. And it's flipping hard, but it is also a massive opportunity. So, to the Carney government, and there are new ministers there, like you will be rewarded in history by doing big things that are hard. And it is maybe challenging in this environment, but I think one of those things is figuring out the transition so that our children have a more sustainable future and our economy continues to grow. And we're bloody lucky with massive critical minerals, a very smart population. We've got the longest coastline in the world. We've got many, awesome attributes, but it's a very different world from when I was studying international relations at U of T and we were talking about multilateralism and, nice things. It's going to be really, really challenging. But when you're in government, you have a chance to improve lives. And I think also you need to stand up sometimes to big business because those interests aren't always aligned. And as I say, I worked on Bay Street. I get it. We need, companies, we need jobs. But also we need to be making sure that we're protecting Canadians. So the climate impacts where people are being evacuated or people are dying from extreme heat or floods or fires. The national security impact of climate change. That's why, we have Russia and China that are trolling us in our north, and why Donald Trump wants access to us. Actually, he wants our water. He's talked about the Columbia River Treaty. And then there's the huge economic impact that is going to come. Like this moment of truth is going to come if we don't make the transition because no one can afford the costs of climate change. So I think there's huge opportunities, but I also think, you know what? I also go dancing. I also have fun with my girlfriends in my book club. And sometimes I say, SOS, come to my house for a glass of wine and some chips. It's been a hard day. So that's what I hope, from my book. Got to keep on working. Hard things are hard, but also, and for especially the young people, I think it's really, I was just at the Kuchishing conference and young is now under 40. I'm way above that, but they're really worried. And they're worried about our leaders if they really understand the costs of climate change and the future that they're, that's looming for young people, and also the affordability crisis. And, we have these social media companies that are totally transforming things and making everything, a lot of things worse, certainly the discussion on climate and disinformation.
Yeah. And I actually I want to ask you about that because you alluded and you tell the story in your book about giving an interview to a journalist who was also a friend. And you claim it as you misspeaking. People can judge for themselves by reading the story, but you said something and then you kind of quickly put it in the right context. It could be taken out of context. And right in that interview, right after you said it, you said, this is what I actually mean. But that news organization took the clip, isolated it, and played it up. Now, that friend of yours is now in public office, so karma is a thing. I hope that never happens to him. But in terms of how the media is worse than it might once have been, because we're competing, I guess, I don't know, I shouldn't justify it this way, but because you're competing with those forces of social media and the quick hits and the polarization and the algorithms that take people to echo chambers, I don't know why we fall victim to it, but we do. Add all of that together and level it up. You're on a global stage, you're talking about big issues, and the world just feels unreasonable. How do you
Well,
find
I
it?
mean, it's interesting. Okay, so like it's Evan Solomon. He's a friend, and
I
in a
wasn't
way,
going to name him.
it's not fine. Look, I mean, and it's not like a secret. It's in my book now, and he was doing his job. I think though, look, and I really tried to speak like a normal person and not just in sound bites. If you do in sound bites, the reason the prime minister office, and I've talked about this too, they're always telling me sound bites. I was like, sorry, I don't do that. Thank you very much. I try to, because everyone tunes out and it's fake. And it's also
Yeah.
not most of the time answering any question. The challenge though is it's risky. So, and I get punchy. I'm like a little bit Irish. So, I got a bit punchy with my answer and a little bit sloppy. So it's on me. Like, look, I'm a lawyer. I get it. You got to be precise. I corrected myself, but this is the challenge. And look, I feel for media organizations because we have very few left, real independent media organizations. We have a bunch of fake, like, I won't even say fake news because that's falling into a bad trap, but, rage farming outlets that just, take these things, and so you've got to compete in that. And so you're trying to compete, unfortunately, as we all know, negative news, leads and sound bites like, like where a politician, sounds like they don't care or, stupid or whatever, that's gonna get more attention. And I mean, in this context, like what happened, so I did correct it. It was kind of too late because then it was clipped, but it wasn't just clipped by the news organization. Then it was like every, conservative politician thought that would be really amazing to clip me doing that. And then so suddenly then it goes out on social. So then the trolls do their work, but then the algorithms amplify it. And then, there you are. And that's why I felt so sick because I was like, you were sloppy and you made a mistake. And I was pretty hard on myself, to be honest. I don't even think it was one night I didn't sleep. I think I didn't sleep for a week because I knew the consequences of making a mistake. And the problem is, what's the answer to that? Just speak in sound bites and never say anything, and then no one cares and everyone tunes you out? I don't think that's the answer, but it is really challenging right now without access to longer form, like we're doing a longer form discussion here about issues where you can actually get into nuances and where folks don't go to normal media. Like I think we're going to have to really think about this in Canada. Like now our media consumption is basically American. And I know we've talked about this, like gosh, I remember when I was in my whatever 20s, people were talking about this, and but now it's extreme. And we are allowing these platforms that are not neutral. They actually have an agenda. They're filled with foreign interference. I laugh when people talk about, I'm not, don't laugh, but foreign interference when they're like, are they busing people to nomination meetings? I was like, now 24/7 on our phones, we've got massive foreign interference. Be clear that the pipeline debate and the climate debate is being used to polarize our society. That is a goal. It's not even necessarily to win, it's just to polarize folks because it destabilizes governments. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, these are the hard things that people are going to have to grapple with. And it's, in day to day decisions in government, it's very hard to, kind of project out. I think I mean, I do talk about this. I say, like, I think at some point we'll be like, what the heck were we thinking to allow these platforms to act, unfettered, and think that that was okay? And as I say, like, I'll just take it from MySpace. My freedom of speech was being violated when they were constantly attacking me and spreading disinformation. And I would put out something, and then I did it yesterday as a by mistake. I put something out on Twitter just talking about the hate I received. It was a clip, an excerpt that was in the Walrus, and I thought maybe people would be interested in actually understanding it. I forgot to not allow comments from people I don't follow on Twitter. And if people don't like that, too bad. Sorry, I'm not in politics, so I don't have to do any. I can do that if I want. In a series, like a few hours, I had 800 comments, most of them terrible. And I kind of looked at them. Now I don't internalize them, but it was really hard before. And imagine my team, largely young women, like pictures of Barbies getting smashed and talking about killing me. And It is weird that we kind of are like, I guess this is what we're doing now, and we'll just go with it. It's hard. Like, I'm not sure there's an easy solution to this, but we better be grappling with it if we want to protect our democracy. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me. Whatever. As I say, I'm out of politics. I will support women and girls and young people. That's why I wrote this book. I'm not. If people look at the back, they'll be sad because they won't see. Most people won't see their name listed. Important people won't see their name listed in the index. But I mean, this is really about the future of our democracy in a very different world, but we are literally allowing people to slam it every single day and polarize us and manipulate us, even if we don't think that that's what's happening. It really is. And I saw that firsthand when I was working on climate. It makes it very, very difficult to bring people together around really important issues.
We're just about out of time, but I do want to ask you, I mean, as you said, the book is not traditional political memoir. Its format is different, right? You do have images. It sort of feels more like a scrapbook, maybe. It's very personal, Catherine. And I think that it makes a lot of sense because you talk a lot about governing and politics and policy and the big challenges, but it's also a glimpse of who you are and how you got there. What do you hope happens with this book? How do you hope it's received? Where do you hope it hits?
Well, of course, bestseller, joking or not. But no, what I hope is that it inspires young people, women and young people who are looking to make change. Because the whole point of this book is I had no idea how to make change. Like, as I said, like, I just had to figure it out. I didn't even know how to run in politics properly. And everyone was giving me all this advice. And I was like, kind of screw it. Like, I'm going to do it my own way. Now, I wasn't a fool. Like, there are models, some things to follow. You got to knock on doors. But I think it's really just, I want to be hopeful, but I have to be realistic. Like, I don't like, I'm too Gen X to be like, oh, it's all great. And here's my lessons. If you just follow everything I did, it'll be amazing. No, you will see there were hard things in my life. Like, everything doesn't exactly go as planned. And that's okay because also, I think you'll see, I went to Indonesia to film a documentary with a friend. It was supposed to be about Komodo dragons. And then I ended up back there because I thought it was such a fascinating place, which led me to a peacekeeping mission, or led me to start a charity. Like, life is a journey. And so for young people, often women, I talk to them, they're like, okay, I got to plan everything out. And like, kids are now planning everything out, like at age 12. Like, whether I was like, gosh, like, first of all, the world is so not like that anymore that you can plan what career is going to look like. But also, that's not how life works, and that's not how change works. Like, there will be opportunities and there'll be challenges, and you come from somewhere. Like, I have a very strong Irish father, so I talk about being, growing up in an Irish Catholic family. It's a particular thing, at least it was in my case, and it was quite defining. My mom stayed at home, so I didn't even get her. So I only understood how much work she did when I was in my 20s and 30s, especially when I had kids. So I want people to feel like they can make change too. That sometimes when I go to events, like I'm doing an event at the University of Toronto, they'll read my CV and it sounds like I was like, oh, it was all planned. Like, wow, like I could, I remember going to these events and I'd say I'll never be able to do this. I want everyone to know that they can make change too if they really want to, and they can do it in their own way and not completely on your own terms, but somewhat on your own terms. Because lots of people will tell you lots of things, and it's hard. And I think for women, like, I start with the poster that I had on my wall in university. It's a Nike ad, first one for women. And it was about becoming significant to yourself. And it's about like being able to do things for yourself and understanding what is good for you. And so I think that's also just an important lesson. It's easy now. I'm in my 50s, so I kind of don't care what people think, to be honest. But it took me a long way to get there. And I think it's okay that life is, a journey, and sometimes it's circular and nonlinear, and sometimes it's really hard. But you can make a difference. And sure, like, I've had setbacks. I lost carbon pricing. Would I still have not gone into politics? No way. I think politics was critically important. We got a new government. We did a lot of important things, but you can also do things out of government. That's why it was easy to leave, because I was trying to make change. And then when I decided that this wasn't the best vehicle for me to make change, I was like, goodbye politics. And then people are like, wow, that doesn't make sense, because if you want to work on climate change, you have to work in politics. So I was like, that is very weird. That's not true. And so, yeah, I just hope to try to inspire people in a hard time, but also hard things are hard. So we also have to recognize, like, it's not going to be easy. And as I say, some days you can just go dancing with your friends and have fun.
Catherine, it's so good to have you with us. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. Great chatting with you, Amanda. I'm sure there'll be time in the future, too.
We've been speaking with Catherine McKenna. Before you go, here are 3 things we think are worth watching this week. Mark Carney headed to Washington to meet with President Trump. Make nice is what came to mind watching it, and maybe that will yield results. Trump directed his teams to get a deal done quickly on the contentious issues of steel and aluminum tariffs, but also had some more ambiguous things to say about a larger trade deal. Speaking of larger, a leading economist said this week he thinks the federal deficit could actually be as much as $100 billion this fiscal year, which ends next March. Stéphane Marion made the remarks at a Bloomberg conference, and he wasn't criticizing exactly. Like other economists, he's willing to wait and see. But he did note Canada has more fiscal room for this budget than some other countries do. And speaking of budgets, a lot of consumers are braced for the worst when it comes to the economy and their jobs, and for some, it's already here. According to insolvency firm MNP, some Canadians are already making what they call heat or eat decisions, with 3 in 10 reducing their utility consumption and a quarter saying they are eating less to save money. That's the kind of trade-off nobody wants to see. That's Wonk for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.